He raised his hand in front of 70 of the most powerful people in Colorado, and he brought it down across his wife's face like she was nothing, like she had always been nothing. The sound cracked through the ballroom like a gunshot, and for one breathless moment, every conversation, every laugh, every clink of crystal stopped cold. Jonathan Hale had just made the worst mistake of his life. He just didn't know it yet. If this story made your blood boil in the first 10 seconds, you are exactly where you need to be. Subscribe to this channel right now, hit that notification bell, and follow Maya's story all the way to the end, because I promise you what comes next will leave you speechless. And drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The Hale family Winter Gala was the kind of event that made ordinary people feel like they were watching the world through glass. It was held every December at the Hale estate in the foothills of Colorado, a sprawling stone manor surrounded by pine trees dusted in snow, its grand ballroom lit by 3,000 hand-strung crystals that caught the light and scattered it across the walls like broken stars. 70 guests had been personally invited. Senators, corporate executives, charity board members, federal judges, old money and new power, all dressed in black and gold, all moving through the room with the practiced ease of people who had never once been told no. The event had a theme, as it always did: legacy and light. It was by every visible measure a perfect evening. Maya Carter stood near the center of the room in a floor-length navy dress, a glass of sparkling water in her hand that she had not touched in 40 minutes. She smiled when smiled at. She nodded when spoken to. She said the right things at the right moments, remarked on the floral arrangements, complimented. The caterer laughed softly at a joke told by Senator Warren's wife. She had been performing this role for 9 years, and she had become very, very good at it. No one at that gala knew what she was carrying. No one at that gala knew who she really was. "You're quiet tonight," said a voice beside her. Maya turned. Celeste Whitford materialized out of the crowd, like smoke-long red-dress diamond earrings that caught the light, a smile that was wide and perfect and completely empty. Celeste was 34, 5 years younger than Maya, and she moved through the Hale world like she had been born to it, which, as far as Jonathan was concerned, she might as well have been. "I'm always quiet at these things," Maya said simply. "Jonathan mentioned you've been tired lately." Celeste tilted her head, and there was something in her eyes, not concern, not warmth, something closer to assessment. "He worries about you." Maya looked at her for a moment. "Does he?" "He does." Celeste's smile didn't shift even slightly. "We all do." Maya turned back toward the room. "I appreciate that, Celeste." She heard the clicks of heels as Celeste drifted away back into the crowd, back toward the knot of guests surrounding Jonathan near the far end of the ballroom. Maya watched him for a moment, tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair just beginning to silver at the temples, wearing that tailored charcoal suit that Beatrice had chosen for him. He was laughing at something. His hand was on the shoulder of Congressman Mitchell. He looked as he always did in public, like a man who had everything under control. Maya looked away. Her phone was in her small clutch purse, and she could feel it against her fingers, even without opening the bag. She had felt it there all evening, like a heartbeat, steady, present, waiting. She had been waiting too. Jonathan appeared at her side 20 minutes later. He didn't touch her. He stood close enough that the gesture would read as intimate to anyone watching, and he spoke very quietly without moving his lips, much the way he had learned to do at events like this. "Senator Warren's wife asked me why you haven't been at the Foundation's benefit lunches," he said. "What exactly have you been telling people?" "I haven't been telling anyone anything," Maya said. She seemed to think you were unwell. "I am unwell," Maya said. "I've had a headache for approximately 9 years. Jonathan's jaw tightened. It was the only visible sign, just a small movement of muscle below his ear, but she knew it. She had cataloged all of his warning signs the way you catalog exits in a building you know might catch fire. "This is not the night to be clever," he said. "I'm not being clever, I'm being honest." "Maya?" His voice dropped another register. "I need you to be present tonight, completely present. Beatrice is watching, the board members are watching, and there are things happening that require stability from this family." "What kind of things?" she asked. He looked at her. then really looked at her, and for just a fraction of a second she saw something flicker behind his eyes. Not guilt. Jonathan didn't do guilt, but something adjacent to it. A calculation. "Nothing that concerns you," he said. He moved away, and Maya stood there holding her untouched glass of sparkling water, and she thought, "You have no idea how much concerns me." Across the room, Beatrice Hale held court near the fireplace. She was 71 years old and looked as she always looked, like a woman who had personally negotiated peace treaties. Her silver hair was pinned in a perfect chignon. Her posture was flawless. She wore a single strand of pearls that had belonged to her mother, and before that to her grandmother, a lineage of elegance that she wore like armor. She was speaking to two of the foundation's major donors, and even from across the room, Maya could see the precision of it, the way Beatrice leaned forward slightly when she wanted to signal confidence, the way she placed her hand briefly on a forearm to signal connection. Beatrice had built this world. The Gala, the foundation, the Hale family's reputation, all of it was her architecture. Jonathan was the face. Beatrice was the foundation. And she had decided a long time ago that Maya Carter was a crack in the wall. Maya had not always known this. In the beginning 9 years ago, when she had first entered the Hale family as Jonathan's wife, she had believed Beatrice's warmth was real. The older woman had taken her to tea, shown her around the estate, taught her the rhythms and rituals of the family. She had seemed in those early months like an unexpected gift. A mother figure. Something Maya, who had grown up with almost nothing, had quietly ached for. It took her 4 years to understand that Beatrice was not teaching her to belong. She was teaching her to be useful. "Mrs. Hale." A young woman appeared at Maya's elbow, a server no older than 22, with dark hair pulled back, and eyes that were slightly too wide, slightly too alert for someone who was supposed to be invisible. Her name badge read Lacey. Maya glanced at her. "Yes. I'm sorry to interrupt." The young woman kept her voice barely above a whisper. She was not holding a tray. She was not refilling glasses. She was standing still, looking at Maya with an expression that was somehow both terrified and deliberate. I wanted to say that I think you're very brave." Maya stared at her. "I'm sorry. I think—" Lacey's eyes flicked briefly across the room, then back. "I think what you're doing takes a lot of courage, and I just wanted you to know that." Then she was gone, sliding back into the crowd, disappearing among the other servers, and Maya stood completely still for a moment, trying to understand what had just happened. She had never spoken to that girl in her life. Her fingers tightened around her clutch. The evening moved on. The string quartet shifted into something slower. Beatrice made a small speech about the Foundation's charitable work, clean water initiatives, medical research grants, community health programs, and the room applauded warmly. Congressman Mitchell shook Jonathan's hand. A photographer captured the moment. Maya stood at the edge of the applause and clapped with everyone else. It was 40 minutes later when it happened. She had stepped away from the main crowd. She told herself she needed air, though what she actually needed was 60 seconds of not performing, and she was standing near the East Corridor entrance, partially hidden by a large arrangement of white orchids, when Jonathan found her. She heard him before she saw him. His footsteps were fast and hard, which was never a good sign. "Where have you been?" he said, "standing here." She turned to face him. "I needed you 5 minutes ago. Beatrice was asking for you and you were—" He stopped. He was looking at her with an expression she recognized, not just anger, but the particular kind of anger that comes from embarrassment, from feeling that something is out of his control. "Elena Cruz called you tonight. I saw the notification on your phone when you left it on the table." Maya felt something go cold inside her chest. "You were looking at my phone," she said carefully. "It's my house," he said. "Everything in it is mine." She looked at him for a long moment. "I need to go back to the ballroom, Jonathan." "Elena Cruz is your old editor," he said. "Why is she calling you? What is she? Are you talking to people? Are you—" His voice had gone very quiet, the kind of quiet that had always been more dangerous than yelling. "What are you doing, Maya?" "Nothing," she said. "I'm standing here." "Don't." He stepped closer. "Don't do that. Don't look at me like I'm stupid." "I'm not looking at you like anything. I would like to go back to the party." "You're not going anywhere until you tell me—" Jonathan, she kept her voice absolutely level. We're at your family's gala. There are 70 people 30 feet away. Let me go back to the room. Something shifted in his face. Later, she would try to understand what exactly had moved through him in that moment, whether it was fury at being managed, or fear at what he suspected she knew, or simply the accumulated pressure of a man who had been holding too many secrets and had run out of places to put them. She would never fully understand it. What she knew was that his hand came up fast, and the sound of it, the sound that his palm made against her cheek, traveled. The ballroom went silent within 2 seconds. Jonathan's expression shifted so quickly from rage to a kind of stunned vacancy that it was almost like watching two different men occupy the same body. He stepped back. He straightened his jacket. He opened his mouth. She saw him do it, saw the machinery of denial spin up behind his eyes, and then he seemed to realize that 70 people were looking at him, and whatever speech he had prepared died before it reached the air. Maya did not move. She stood exactly where she was. Her cheek was burning, her eyes were dry, and she was very, very still, not because she was in shock, not because she was afraid, but because she was listening to the sound of the room. The string quartet had stopped. The conversations had stopped. The light clink of glassware had stopped. 70 of the most powerful people in Colorado were looking at Jonathan Hale, and not one of them spoke. Senator Warren looked at the floor. Congressman Mitchell found something very interesting to study on the ceiling. Beatrice Hale from across the room met Maya's eyes for exactly 1 second, and then she turned away. Deliberately, completely. The way you turn away from something you have already decided you did not see. That moment, that single act of turning, was the one that cut deepest. Not the slap, not Jonathan's hand, not the silence of 70 witnesses. It was the one person in the room who might have said something, choosing instead to protect the image. A woman moved through the crowd quietly, efficiently, the way that young woman Lacey had moved earlier, and she placed a glass of water near Maya's hand without being asked. Maya did not look at her. She wrapped her fingers around the glass. Then her phone vibrated. She almost didn't check it. She was still standing in that strange suspended moment, the burning in her cheek fading slowly into a dull heat, the room beginning to unfreeze around her in increments, people resuming conversations, the quartet playing a soft note, and then another, someone laughing a little too loudly at something that wasn't funny. But she checked it. One message. No name attached to the number, just a sequence of digits she had memorized 3 weeks ago. Turn on the screen. Your name is live. She read it twice. Then she looked up, and across the room she saw the television screens, 4 of them mounted high on the walls of the ballroom for the gala's multimedia presentations, flicker simultaneously. The screensaver image disappeared. A news broadcast filled all 4 screens. The chyron at the bottom read breaking news. And in the top right corner of every screen in the graphic that television studios used to identify the reporter behind the story was a face, her face, and a name. Maya Carter, investigative journalist. The room, which had just barely begun to breathe again, stopped for the second time that night. Jonathan turned to look at the screens. He turned very slowly, like a man who already knows what he's about to see and is simply delaying the moment of understanding it. His face went the color of old ash. "What?" he said. Just that one word. Maya stood holding her glass of water, her cheek still warm, and she looked at her own face on the screen, and she felt something she had not felt in 9 years. She felt like herself. Jonathan spun toward her. "What did you do?" She didn't answer. She looked at the screen. "Maya." His voice had lost its control entirely. Now it was ragged low, the voice of a man watching something collapse and not yet understanding the full scale of it. "Maya, what did you do? What is this? What is—" "Ladies and gentlemen," said Beatrice Hale, her voice cutting cleanly through the room from near the fireplace, still composed, still in command. "I believe there's been some kind of technical issue with the screens. If someone could—" "It's not a technical issue," said a voice from the back of the room. Everyone turned. It was the young server, Lacey, standing near the doorway with a tablet in her hands, and the expression of someone who has been quietly terrified for weeks and has finally decided to stop being afraid. "It's live," Lacey said. "It's broadcasting to the whole country right now. The silence that followed was different from the first silence. The first silence had been the silence of shock. This silence was the silence of comprehension. Beatrice's composure shifted. Not collapsed, not yet, but shifted like a building that has absorbed an earthquake and is deciding whether to stand. Jonathan took a step toward Maya. "You need to fix this," he said. She looked at him. "I already did." He reached for her arm and then stopped. Because the room was watching. Because 70 people had already watched him raise his hand once tonight. Because even Jonathan Hale, in all his arrogance, understood that there was a threshold beyond which even his name could not protect him. He dropped his hand. Maya turned back to the screen. The broadcast continued without waiting for any of them. She listened to the opening of the story, her story. The story she had spent 4 months building in secret. The story she had fed piece by piece to Elena Cruz at the network. The story that began with a single question she had asked herself one night while sitting in the dark of a guest bedroom in this very house. What are they actually doing with the foundation's money? The answer had taken her 4 months to find. It had required old contacts she had not used in 9 years. It had required an encrypted phone, a secondary email address, and a series of meetings held in coffee shops an hour's drive from the estate. It had required Elena Cruz, who had never stopped believing in her, calling her at 11 at night and saying, "Maya, this is the biggest story you've ever touched. I need to know if you're ready." She had said yes. Celeste Whitford was standing near the east wall with a champagne glass halfway to her lips and an expression that had gone completely blank, the expression of a woman watching her name move toward the surface of something very cold. Beatrice had not sat down. She was still standing still, perfectly upright, but one hand had found the back of a chair and was resting there with slightly too much weight. Jonathan had taken 3 steps back from Maya and was staring at the screen with the focused, contained expression of a man trying to calculate something very quickly and realizing that the numbers are not adding up. The broadcast had just said his name. Maya heard it clearly. Jonathan Hale, heir to the Hale family fortune and co-director of the Hale Foundation, whose financial records show a pattern of, and then the anchor's voice continued precise and measured, building the case with the brick-by-brick patience of investigative journalism done properly. Someone in the room made a sound, a small involuntary exhalation. Senator Warren set down his glass. 3 of the Foundation's board members exchanged a look that Maya recognized. It was the look of people who are rapidly calculating how far away they need to get. "Turn it off," Jonathan said. Nobody moved. "Someone turn it off," he said again, louder. The young woman near the doorway, Lacey, reached toward her tablet. "Don't," said another voice. It was one of the board members, a woman named Dr. Patricia Ewan, 60 years old, who had been on the Foundation's board for 11 years and had, according to the documents Maya had found, been asking questions about the financials for the last 3 of those years and receiving stonewalled non-answers. Dr. Ewan was watching the screen with an expression that was not panic. It was recognition. "Don't turn it off," she said again quietly, clearly. The room held its breath. The broadcast continued, and Maya Carter stood in the center of the Hale family's perfectly constructed world with the burning print of her husband's hand still fading on her cheek, and she did not look away from the screen. She had been small in this house for 9 years. She had been decorative and managed and strategically ignored and slowly, methodically erased. She had given up the work she loved, the identity she had built, the voice that had once been powerful enough to bring down corrupt men in 3 different states. She had given all of that up because she had believed genuinely, completely, with the full and trusting heart of a woman who had spent her childhood with very little and had wanted so desperately to belong somewhere that Jonathan Hale was different from the men she had spent her career exposing. She had been wrong. And now she was standing in his ballroom in front of his guests wearing his name, and that name was lighting up on 4 screens, simultaneously attached to a story that she had built, sourced, verified, and filed. Jonathan was looking at her now, not at the screens, at her. And what she saw on his face was not just anger, it was the slow, dawning, terrible recognition of someone who has underestimated a person for 9 consecutive years and is only now in this moment in front of 70 witnesses and a national broadcast beginning to understand the full scale of that mistake. "Maya," he said. She turned to look at him, and for the first time in 9 years, she did not look away first. "You should listen to the rest of the broadcast," she said. "There's a part near the end with your emails." The glass slipped out of Celeste Whitford's hand. It shattered on the marble floor, and in the ringing silence of the ballroom, it sounded somehow like the beginning of everything. The glass shattered, and nobody moved to clean it up. That was the first sign that something fundamental had shifted in the room. In any normal moment at a Hale family event, 3 staff members would have materialized within seconds, silent and efficient, sweeping away any evidence of disorder before it could register as real. But in this moment, nobody came. The servers were standing still. The guests were standing still. And Celeste Whitford was staring at the broken pieces on the marble floor like she was trying to read something in the pattern they made. Jonathan moved first. He crossed the distance between himself and Maya in 4 steps, quick, deliberate, with the controlled urgency of a man who has spent his entire life solving problems by getting physically close to them. And when he stopped, he was near enough that she could see the fine tension in the muscles around his jaw, the particular tightness that meant he was running scenarios behind his eyes and not liking any of them. "We are going to walk out of this room together," he said, low, even the voice he used when he was trying to sound calm and was not calm at all. "Right now, you and me, and we are going to have a conversation in private." "No," Maya said. Just that, no. 1 syllable flat and clean like a door closing. He blinked. It was such a small physical reaction, but she had never, not once in 9 years, simply refused him like that. Not out loud, not in front of people. And the shock of it moved across his face before he could stop it. "Excuse me," he said. "I'm not going anywhere with you," she said. "Not tonight, not anymore." Someone behind her exhaled sharply. She didn't turn around to see who. On the screens above them, the broadcast was still running. The anchor's voice filled the ballroom with the calm, methodical rhythm of a story being told in chronological order, and the story it was telling was the story of the Hale Foundation, its founding, its stated mission, its published charity reports, and then piece by piece the widening distance between what those reports claimed and what the actual financial records showed. Maya had spent 4 months living inside those numbers. She knew them the way you know a language you learned as a child, not by translating, but by thinking in it directly. And she knew, because she had built this story from its foundation, up exactly where the broadcast was in its timeline. They were about 4 minutes from the emails. Jonathan knew it too. She could tell by the way his breathing changed. "Whatever you think you've done," he said. And now his voice was dropping below even that controlled, low register, moving into something that was almost a whisper. "You have made a very serious mistake. You don't understand what you're touching." "I understand it completely," she said. "Maya." He said her name like it was a warning. "There are people connected to this foundation who will not people with significant—" He stopped, recalibrated, tried again. "You are going to hurt people who have nothing to do with whatever you think I've done." She looked at him steadily. "The people I'm going to hurt," she said, "are the people who stole $43 million from grieving families who thought they were donating to medical research. Those people." She paused. "Were you planning to be more specific?" His face changed completely. And it was in that moment, that exact moment, that she knew he had not actually believed until right now that she had the full picture. He had suspected she was asking questions. He had worried she had found threads. But the number 43 million, precise and documented, landed on him like something physical. "Where did you—" he started. "Jonathan." Beatrice's voice came from directly behind him. He turned. His mother was standing 3 feet away, and whatever had shifted in Beatrice's posture earlier, that slight redistribution of weight, that one hand resting too heavily on the chair, had resolved itself back into perfect stillness. She looked again like a woman who had decided exactly what this situation was, and exactly how she intended to manage it. "Not here," Beatrice said quietly. "Whatever this is, not here." "She's already made it here," Jonathan said, gesturing up at the screens. "She's put it on national television, Mother, in our house, in front of our guests." "Then there is nothing to be gained by continuing it in our house in front of our guests," Beatrice said. Her eyes moved to Maya, then briefly precisely the way a surgeon's eyes move over a complication before deciding on a course of action. "Maya, I think we all need a moment." "I've had 9 years of moments," Maya said. "I'm finished with moments." Beatrice held her gaze for 3 full seconds. "You are making decisions tonight that you will not be able to take back." "I know," Maya said. "I want you to think very carefully." "I have been thinking carefully," Maya said, "for 4 months. Every document, every transfer, every shell company, every grieving family that wrote a check to your medical research grant and got nothing in return except a thank you letter that I found in a box in Jonathan's office signed by a foundation coordinator who doesn't exist." She kept her voice level. She kept it quiet. She was not performing for the room, and somehow that made it worse for all of them. "I thought carefully, Beatrice, the whole time." The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. Dr. Patricia Ewan had moved. She was now standing closer to the center of the room, and she had her phone in her hand, and she was not looking at anyone in the Hale family. She was looking at the screen. "I have the August transfer records," Dr. Ewan said to no one in particular. Her voice was very quiet. "I requested those records 14 months ago and was told they were under internal review." She looked at Jonathan. "They just read 3 of them on air." Jonathan's composure, which had been holding by engineering rather than instinct, showed its first visible crack. "Patricia, this is not—" "I want to know about the Peterson Foundation grant," Dr. Ewan said. "The $2.3 million that was approved in March and never dispersed. I want to know where that money went." "This is not the appropriate forum for—" "It's on the screen," Dr. Ewan said, pointing. "It appears to be the appropriate forum." Someone near the back of the room, one of the younger board members, a man named Davis, who had been on the foundation's board for 18 months and had Maya happened to know been asking increasingly pointed questions at quarterly meetings, took out his own phone and stepped away from the group. Jonathan watched him go, and the calculation in his eyes shifted from rapid to something slower and grimmer, the calculation of someone who has stopped counting assets and started counting exits. He turned back to Maya. "You don't know what you've started," he said. She didn't answer him this time. The broadcast reached the emails at exactly the moment she had calculated it would. The anchor's voice said, "Internal correspondence obtained by this network reveals a pattern of deliberate misdirection to board members and donors regarding the allocation of restricted funds." And then on the screens in large, clean text that was readable from across the ballroom, a series of email excerpts appeared. The room read them in silence. The first was from Jonathan to a man named Harris Webb, dated 14 months ago. "Move the restricted grant allocation through the consulting line before the quarter closes. Patricia is asking questions again." The second was from Harris Webb back to Jonathan, dated the same week. "Done. Whitford's signature is on the consulting invoice. She doesn't know. Keep it that way." And the third, the one that Maya had known would land the hardest because she had read it 40 times herself, and each time felt the same cold clarity move through her, was from Beatrice Hale to Jonathan, dated 11 months ago. The anchor read it aloud. "Maya has become a liability. She asks too many questions, and she has too many old contacts. If she discovers what we've built here, she will not stay quiet out of loyalty. She was a journalist before she was your wife. She will be one again the moment she has something worth reporting. Replace her with someone more manageable before this becomes a problem we cannot contain." The ballroom was absolutely silent. Then Celeste Whitford made a sound. It was not a word. It was the kind of sound a person makes when something they have been telling themselves for a long time is suddenly disproved by evidence that cannot be argued with. She looked at Jonathan. He did not look back at her. He was looking at his mother. "You wrote that," he said. His voice had changed entirely, not the controlled authority, not the managed whisper, but something stripped of all its engineering, something raw. "You wrote that to me about my wife, Jonathan. You wrote to me that she was a liability, that I should replace her. Those exact words." "I was protecting the family," Beatrice said. "You were protecting the money," he said. And in the small, terrible space that opened between them in that moment, Maya understood something she had not fully understood before tonight. Jonathan had not known about that email. Or if he had known he had pushed it somewhere, he did not have to examine it. And seeing it displayed in 36-point font on 4 screens in his own ballroom, read aloud by a national anchor in front of senators and judges, and the woman it was written about something in him was registering it for the first time as what it was. It did not make her feel sorry for him, but it clarified something. Beatrice had not just been protecting the foundation. She had been running Jonathan the same way she ran everything else, managing inputs, controlling outputs, deciding what he knew and when he knew it. And Jonathan, who had spent 46 years believing himself to be the architect of his own power, was standing in his family's ballroom discovering that he had been, at least in part, a very well-dressed instrument. He looked at Maya. She looked back at him. Neither of them spoke. It was Senator Warren who moved next, excusing himself with a murmured word to his wife, stepping toward the edge of the room with his phone pressed to his ear, his posture shifting into the particular configuration of a man who was calling his lawyer. His wife watched him go and then looked at Maya with an expression that was complex and unreadable and lasted less than a second before she looked away. Congressman Mitchell had already moved. He was near the coat check. He did not look at anyone. Lacey, the young server who had started all of this in motion, the girl who had told Maya she was brave, was still standing near the doorway with her tablet. She was watching the room with wide eyes that were taking in everything. Maya noticed with a very specific kind of attention that Lacey's tablet was recording, not the broadcast, the room. Good girl, Maya thought. I need everyone to remain calm, Beatrice said to the room. Beatrice. Dr. Ewan's voice was quiet and final. I think it's time for you to stop telling people what to do. Beatrice looked at her. I have been on this board for 11 years, Dr. Ewan said. I have attended every quarterly meeting. I have read every annual report. I have asked questions that were not answered and raised concerns that were dismissed and been told repeatedly that I was misreading the numbers. She paused. I was not misreading the numbers. Patricia, you don't have the full context. I have enough context, Dr. Ewan said. She held up her phone. And I'm on the line with the Foundation's independent auditor right now. She's watching the broadcast from her home in Denver. She has some questions. Jonathan put his hands in his pockets. It was such a normal human gesture, such an ordinary thing, the gesture of a man who simply doesn't know what to do with his hands, that it was almost jarring in the context of everything that was falling apart around him. He turned to Maya one more time. Everything we built, he said. Everything. You understand what you've destroyed tonight. She looked at him for a long moment. I didn't destroy it, she said. You built it broken. I just turned on the lights. He flinched. It was small. It was real. She saw it. He turned away. Celeste had moved to the far side of the room, not toward the door, not yet, but away from the center of things, away from Jonathan, toward a corner where she was standing with her arms crossed, and her champagne abandoned on a nearby table, and an expression on her face that was somewhere between fury and something much more frightened than fury. Maya looked at her for a moment, then she crossed the room toward her. She had not planned to do this, but there was something in Celeste's face, something beneath the fear and the calculation that she recognized. Not sympathy exactly. Recognition. The consulting invoices, Maya said quietly when she reached her. The ones with your signature. Harris Webb told Jonathan you didn't know. Celeste looked at her. I didn't. I know, Maya said. Celeste blinked. Then why is my name? Because they used you, Maya said simply, like they use everyone. She held Celeste's gaze for a moment. The network has your signature on 6 invoices totaling $4.7 million. If you want to get ahead of this, you need to call someone tonight. Celeste stared at her. Why are you telling me this? Maya thought about that for a beat. Because I remember what it felt like to trust him, she said, and because your situation is different from his, but only if you move fast. She walked away. Behind her, she heard Celeste's voice, low urgent, saying someone's name into her phone. She didn't look back. She moved through the center of the room, past the board members, talking in clusters, past the photographer who had stopped taking photographs and was standing with his camera at his side, looking at the screens, past a group of 3 women wives of board members who watched her pass with expressions she couldn't fully read. But that contained, she thought, something that was not entirely hostile. She stopped near the window. Her cheek had stopped burning. The heat had settled into a steady, dull ache that she was aware of without being controlled by it. She pressed 2 fingers to the spot briefly, then dropped her hand. Her phone vibrated again. Elena Cruz. She picked up immediately. "Tell me you're watching," Elena said. "I'm in the room," Maya said. A pause. "Maya." Elena's voice was careful and warm and proud in the particular way of someone who has believed in something for a long time and is watching it be proven right. "How are you?" "I'm standing," Maya said. "Good." A breath. "There's more coming. You know what's next on the timeline." "The donor database," Maya said. 12,000 families, Maya. The network is putting the support line number on screen in 40 minutes. We're already getting calls." A pause. "This is the story. This is the one that changes things." She looked across the room. Jonathan was near the fireplace now, speaking in a very low voice to someone she didn't recognize, a man in a dark suit who had appeared from somewhere and who carried himself with the particular stillness of someone who was paid to manage situations rather than to be in them. A fixer, she thought. Of course. Beatrice was watching the fixer talk to Jonathan. Her face was composed. Her hands were folded. She looked like a woman doing arithmetic. "Elena," Maya said quietly. "Yeah. The email. The one Beatrice wrote. Is that going to hold?" "We have the original server records, the metadata, and a witness who was CC'd on a forwarded version and didn't realize it at the time," Elena said. "It holds. It holds completely." Maya closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. "Okay," she said. "There's one more thing," Elena said. Her voice shifted, still warm but careful. "The network wants you on air. Tonight if you're willing. Live. 20 minutes from now." Maya opened her eyes. She looked at the room, at the splintering of the world that had contained her for 9 years. At Jonathan's back, stiff and controlled, speaking to the fixer. At Beatrice, still and watchful. At Dr. Ewan on her phone near the window. At Lacey near the door with her tablet recording everything. At the screens where her own face looked back at her, steady and serious and completely unafraid. "Set it up," Maya said. She ended the call. Across the room, Jonathan turned. He didn't know what she had just agreed to. He didn't know what was coming in 20 minutes. He just turned the way you turn when you feel someone's eyes on you, instinctive, involuntary. And he looked at her. And whatever he saw on her face in that moment, it was enough to make him take a single step backward. Just one step. But she saw it. She put her phone in her clutch and straightened her shoulders and stood in the center of the ruin of the world he had built. And she thought about the next 20 minutes, and she was not afraid of a single second of them. Outside the estate, 3 black and white Colorado State Patrol vehicles had pulled through the main gate. Nobody inside the ballroom knew yet. But Lacey's tablet caught the headlights through the window, and she looked up, and she looked at Maya across the room, and she gave one small, certain nod. Lacey's nod was small and certain, and Maya held it in her peripheral vision as she turned back toward the room because she needed that. She needed that small human signal that she was not standing alone in this before the next 20 minutes began. The fixer was still talking to Jonathan. Maya watched him from across the room and tried to read the conversation in posture and gesture the way she had trained herself to do over 15 years of investigative work. The fixer was doing most of the talking. Jonathan was listening with his arms slightly away from his sides open, receiving, which meant he was in reception mode, not command mode. He was being told what to do. And the fact that he was accepting that Jonathan Hale was standing in his own ballroom, taking direction from a man in a dark suit, told her everything she needed to know about how badly the last 40 minutes had rattled him. Beatrice watched the same conversation from near the fireplace and said nothing. Her silence, Maya had learned long ago, was never emptiness. It was a container. It held things. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number that resolved itself immediately into someone she recognized. Marcus Tran, a former colleague from her journalism days, now a producer at the network. Camera crew is at the East Gate. Lacey knows to let them in. You have 17 minutes. She read it twice, then put the phone away. 17 minutes. She had built careers in less time than that. She had dismantled lies in 20 seconds flat when she had the right document in her hands. 17 minutes was plenty of time. 17 minutes was an entire story if you knew what you were telling. She moved toward the center of the room. Several guests tracked her movement. Not all of them, some were still clustered in the defensive formations that powerful people adopt when they sense institutional danger, tight circles of murmured conversation and angled backs. But enough eyes followed her that she felt the room's attention redistribute itself the way water redistributes when something new breaks the surface. Davis, the young board member who had stepped away earlier with his phone, reappeared at her side. He was in his mid-30s, sandy-haired, with the particular exhausted alertness of someone who has been sitting on information they didn't know what to do with. "The Peterson grant," he said without preamble. "I flagged it 8 months ago. I sent a memo to the full board." "I know," Maya said. "I have the memo." He stared at her. "How?" "I have a lot of things," she said. "That's the whole point." He exhaled a long, ragged breath that sounded like something that had been held in for quite a while. "I thought I was losing my mind," he said. "I thought I was reading the numbers wrong. Everyone kept telling me I was reading the numbers wrong." "You weren't," she said. He looked at the screens, then back at her. "What do you need from me?" She studied him for a moment. "Nothing tonight, but in the next 72 hours, someone from the network's legal team is going to call you, and the SEC may reach out as well, when they do cooperate completely." He nodded. Something visibly settled in him the way things settle when a person has been carrying a weight alone and is finally told they can set it down. She kept moving. Jonathan intercepted her before she reached the far side of the room. He stepped into her path, not grabbing, not touching, having learned that lesson 40 minutes ago, but placing himself close enough that stopping was necessary. The fixer was no longer beside him. She noted that. He had sent the fixer away to talk to her directly, which meant the calculation had shifted again. He was back to managing her himself. "We can settle this," he said. She looked at him. "Settle what?" "All of it. The broadcast, the story. Whatever deal you made with Cruz, I can make a better one." "Elena isn't selling anything," Maya said. "Neither am I. Everything is negotiable." "Not everything." "Maya." He lowered his voice to the register that had worked on her once Ernest stripped of its authority, the voice of a man asking rather than demanding. She recognized the performance. She had once believed it was not a performance. "Listen to me. There are people in this network, people above the foundation level, who will respond to this in ways that will be bad for you. You think you're protected because you have a story. You're not. I can protect you, but not if you keep going." She looked at him for a long moment. "You just told me you can protect me," she said. "In the same house where you put your hand across my face 2 hours ago." He flinched. "Yes," she said. "I'm going to keep going." She walked around him. She heard him say something behind her, her name, just her name once, and then the sound of him not following her, which was its own kind of answer. 14 minutes. The east corridor opened and 2 members of a camera crew entered, moving quickly and professionally carrying equipment with the efficiency of people who had set up in difficult locations before. Lacey was with them, guiding them through, and the young woman's face had shed its fear entirely. She looked purposeful. She looked like someone doing the thing they were meant to do. Maya crossed to them. "Where do you want me?" she asked. The lead camera operator, a woman with close-cropped hair named Dee, was already scanning the room with a practiced eye. "Near the north wall. The screens will be visible in frame behind you." "Good," Maya said. "We've got 11 minutes before Elena goes live. She'll intro from the studio and hand to you for the field segment. You know the format." "I know the format," Maya said. She had invented half of it 15 years ago, in a different life that was apparently not as finished as she had believed. "One thing." Dee looked at her directly. "Your face. The mark on your cheek." Maya had been not thinking about that for the last hour. She touched it briefly. It had faded from burning to a dull soreness, but she knew from Dee's expression and from her own body's memory that it was visible. Probably very visible. "Leave it," she said. Dee nodded once, no further discussion. They were setting up when Beatrice reached her. She arrived alone, no Jonathan, no aide, no buffer of any kind. And she stopped in front of Maya with the direct, unadorned confrontation of a woman who has decided that the time for management has passed and that only truth, or her version of it remains. "I want you to understand something," Beatrice said. "I'm listening," Maya said. "Everything I built this foundation, this family standing the work we've done in this community, none of it is as simple as what they're reading on that broadcast. There is context that is not in your documents." "There's always context," Maya said. "That's what sources are for. I had 11 sources, Beatrice. 11 people who sat with me in the last 4 months and told me things that your context does not account for. 3 of them were families who donated money to the medical research grant. Their children are sick. One of them died last spring." She paused. "Tell me about the context for that." Beatrice's composure held, but something moved behind it, something small and human that Maya had never seen there before, and she could not tell even now whether it was genuine or whether it was simply another layer of management. "I have made decisions," Beatrice said carefully, "that I believed were in service of something larger." "You stole from grieving people," Maya said. "Whatever story you tell yourself about it, that is what happened. The foundation has done real good. And it has done real harm. Both things are true. The harm doesn't disappear because of the good." Maya looked at her steadily. "You know what the worst part is? I would have listened. If you had sat down with me 3 years ago and said, 'Maya, there are problems and I need help solving them,' I would have listened. I was your daughter-in-law. I wanted to be part of this family." She paused. "Instead, you wrote an email telling your son to replace me with someone more manageable." Beatrice said nothing. For the first time in 9 years, possibly for the first time in her life, Beatrice Hale had no response. Maya turned away. 8 minutes. The camera was set. The lights were positioned. Dee was speaking quietly into an earpiece, coordinating with the studio. Lacey had moved to the edge of the room and was tracking the police vehicles outside through the window. There were more now, Maya noticed, and some of them were not state patrol. Some of them were federal. She registered that with a particular professional satisfaction. The room had reorganized itself in the last few minutes. The guests who were not connected to the foundation, the purely social attendees, the political figures who had come for the visibility of the Hale name and were now calculating the cost of that visibility, had gathered near the exits in clusters that maintained the appearance of casual conversation while being very clearly oriented toward the doors. Senator Warren had not returned from his phone call. His wife was still present, sitting in one of the chairs near the string quartet, and she was watching Maya with an expression that had resolved over the course of the evening into something that looked almost like respect. The foundation's board members were split. 3 of them, Davis Dr. Ewan, and a woman named Hoffman, who had been quiet all evening, but who Maya knew had been systematically excluded from financial subcommittee decisions for the past 2 years, had moved into a loose group near the center of the room. They were talking to each other. They were not talking to Jonathan or Beatrice. That split, Maya knew, was the foundation's actual end. Not the broadcast, not the police outside. The moment the board divided itself and 3 members chose the center of the room over the family, that was the structural collapse. Jonathan saw it too. She watched him realize it from across the room, watched the calculation in his face run its last possible scenario and come up empty, watched him look at his mother, watched Beatrice give him nothing, no signal, no strategy, no instruction, because she had run out of those as well. For a moment, he simply stood there. Then he walked toward Maya. Not fast, not with the urgency of a man trying to stop something, just walking the way people walk when they have run out of moves and are simply closing the distance between themselves and the only conversation that remains. He stopped in front of the camera setup. Dee moved slightly, not backing away, just repositioning instinctively to keep him in frame. "You're going on air," he said, not a question. "In 6 minutes," Maya said. "And you're going to say what? That our entire marriage was an investigation." "No," she said. "Our marriage wasn't an investigation. Our marriage was real. That's what made it hard." She held his gaze. "What I'm going to say is what I found and how I found it and what it means for the people who were hurt by it. That's what journalists do, Jonathan. You're not just a journalist. You're my wife." She said quietly, "I was your wife. And before that I was a person. And you made it very clear over 9 years which one of those you actually wanted." She looked at him steadily. "You wanted the wife, not the person. The version of me that attended your galas and smiled for your photographers and stayed out of your business and made your mother feel like the family was stable. She tilted her head slightly. That version of me is gone. She's been gone for a long time. He looked at her for a long moment. I did love you, he said. It came out stripped of everything. No authority, no management, no calculation. Just the words. She believed him. That was the complicated, terrible truth of it. She believed that he had loved her in the particular way that people like Jonathan loved things fully, genuinely, and with the complete blind spot of someone who had never once in his life been asked to love something more than he loved his own control of it. I know, she said. It was the kindest thing she had said to him all evening, and somehow it hurt him more than anything else had. He turned and walked away. 4 minutes. Dee tapped her on the shoulder. We're getting the signal from Elena. Ready? Maya straightened her jacket. She did not check her appearance. She did not touch her cheek. She stood exactly as she was in the same navy dress she had worn all evening, with the same visible mark on her face, in the same room where it had happened. And she said, Ready. Elena Cruz appeared on the monitors beside the camera live from the studio in Denver, and she looked at Maya through the lens with the particular warmth of a woman who had spent 11 years waiting for her best journalist to come back. You sure? Elena said into her earpiece. Private line studio to field. No one else could hear it. Sure as I've been about anything in a long time, Maya said. Elena smiled. Not the television smile, the real one, with the slight asymmetry on the left side. Then let's go. The broadcast indicator light on the camera turned red. Live. The room registered it before Maya spoke a single word. The red light was visible from where many of the guests were standing, and some of them shifted involuntarily. Some moving slightly away, some moving slightly closer, responding to the same deep human instinct that makes people both fear and seek the presence of a live camera. Jonathan had stopped walking. He was at the edge of the room, his back not quite to the camera, and Maya could see in the set of his shoulders the effort it was taking him to not turn around. Good evening. Maya's voice was steady and clear and carried across the ballroom without the aid of a microphone, the voice of someone who had spent 15 years learning exactly how to fill a room with words. I'm Maya Carter. Earlier tonight, this network began broadcasting an investigative report on the Hale Foundation, a report that I built over 4 months and that I stand behind completely. I'm speaking to you now from the Hale estate in Colorado, where the Foundation's annual gala is still in progress, and where approximately 2 hours ago, my husband struck me in front of 70 witnesses, and not one person in this room intervened. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. I want to be clear about something, she continued. What happened to me tonight is connected to what has been happening to thousands of families who trusted the Hale Foundation with their grief and their money. The violence is not separate from the fraud. It is the same impulse, the same belief that certain people can be managed and silenced and replaced when they become inconvenient. I know that impulse very well. I lived inside it for 9 years. Jonathan's shoulders moved, just slightly. The families who are watching this broadcast tonight, the families who donated to the Foundation's medical research programs, the community health grants, the children's wellness initiatives, those families deserve to know that their money did not go where they were told it went. They deserve to know what actually happened, and they deserve to know that there are people on this board at this network and in the legal and regulatory system who are working tonight to hold accountable the people responsible. She paused. Let it breathe. 12,000 families, she said. That's the number. 12,000 individual donations from people who were told they were helping. 12,000 stories that deserved better than what they got. The red light stayed on. And in the room, something happened that Maya had not entirely predicted, though perhaps she should have. One of the wives, the woman who had watched her all evening with that complex, unreadable expression, Senator Warren's wife, stood up from her chair. She did not speak. She simply stood up and looked directly at Maya, and she did not look away. And then slowly Dr. Patricia Ewan crossed her arms and did the same, and Davis and Hoffman and Lacey still near the doorway. They stood there at the middle of the wreckage of the evening, and they looked at her while the red light burned, and she understood that she was not speaking only to the cameras. She was speaking to this room. and the room for the first time all evening was actually listening. Outside, the federal vehicles had moved closer. The first knock on the estate's front door was quiet, almost polite, but it traveled through the stone walls and into the ballroom, and everyone heard it. Beatrice Hale closed her eyes. She kept them closed for 3 full seconds, which was 3 seconds longer than Maya had ever seen Beatrice Hale close her eyes in any situation. Then she opened them, and she straightened, and she said to no one in particular, in the perfectly composed voice of a woman who had never once in her life let a room see her break, "Tell them I'll be out in a moment." It was the last order she gave in that house. Maya kept talking. The red light stayed on, and 12,000 families scattered across the country in living rooms and bedrooms and hospital waiting areas were watching a woman in a navy dress with a bruise on her cheek stand in the center of the most powerful room in Colorado and refuse completely, finally, without apology, to be small. The knock on the front door came a second time, louder now, and this time it did not stop at 1. Beatrice walked toward the main entrance of the estate with the posture of a woman who had decided in the space of 3 seconds with her eyes closed that the only move left was to meet what was coming rather than wait for it to reach her. 2 of the estate's staff longtime employees who had worked in this house for years and who looked in this moment like people watching a building they loved. Burns stepped aside as she passed. She did not acknowledge them. She had managed her expressions for so long that even now, even in this, her face gave nothing away. Maya watched her go from the camera position. The red light on the camera had gone dark 2 minutes ago. The live segment had ended, Elena's voice in her earpiece saying, "Good job, solid, we'll talk in an hour." But the camera operator, Dee, was still recording on the secondary rig. Documentary footage, contextual footage. The kind of footage that ended up in the follow-up story, the Week 2 story, the story that sustained a scandal past its first news cycle and made it impossible to bury. Everything was still being documented. Jonathan knew this. He had turned finally after Beatrice left the room, and he had looked directly at the secondary camera with an expression that was the purest thing Maya had seen on his face all evening. Not calculation. Not management, just the naked recognition of a man who understands that everything happening right now is permanent. Then he had looked at Maya. She did not look away. He was the one who broke it, turning toward the east corridor, and she heard him say something to the fixer. In a low voice, she caught only the word attorney, and then both of them moved out of the main ballroom. The room exhaled. It was Davis who spoke first, filling the space that Jonathan's exit had left. He turned to Dr. Ewan and said, "We need to convene, tonight if possible, board members only, independent counsel." "Agreed," Dr. Ewan said. "I already texted Hoffman." "What about the donors?" Davis asked. "The ones in this room tonight, there are at least 4 major donors here. Do we say something to them now, or—" "We say nothing until we have counsel," Dr. Ewan said firmly. "That's the first rule." She looked at Maya. "Is there anything in the documents about imminent legal exposure for board members who were not part of the financial subcommittee?" Maya measured her answer carefully. "The documents show a deliberate effort to exclude certain board members from specific financial decisions. That exclusion is documented in the emails. If I were advising you, and I'm not your attorney, I would make sure that exclusion is part of your record immediately." Dr. Ewan nodded slowly. She was already reaching for her phone. "There's one more thing," Maya said, and something in her voice made both Davis and Dr. Yuen go still. "The donor database, the full list of 12,000 names. The network has it, the SEC has been notified, and a copy is in the hands of 3 different attorneys as of tonight. Whoever tries to claim they didn't know the full scope of this, those 12,000 names, make that very difficult to argue." She paused. "I want you both to understand the scale before you make any decisions about how to proceed." Davis looked at the floor for a moment. When he looked up, his expression had the particular texture of a person who is processing something that changes what they thought they knew about the last 18 months of their own life. "There are people in that database," he said quietly, "who I personally asked to donate. I called them. I told them the foundation was doing important work." "I know," Maya said. "I believed it. I know that too." He didn't say anything else, But something in his face settled into a kind of resolve that she recognized, the resolve of someone who has decided that the only way through something terrible is to go through it completely without flinching. She had felt that resolve herself 4 months ago, sitting in a coffee shop an hour from this estate, reading a financial record that confirmed the worst of what she had suspected. She knew what it felt like in the body. She knew how it sat in the chest. She left them to it and moved toward the window where Lacey was standing. The young woman had put her tablet down. She was watching the front drive, the federal vehicles, the quiet, purposeful movement of agents outside, with an expression that had traveled a very long distance over the course of one evening. She had started the night as a server. She was ending it as a witness. "You should talk to someone from the network's legal team tonight," Maya said when she reached her, "before you talk to anyone else." Lacey looked at her. "Am I in trouble?" "No," Maya said. "But you have something valuable. The recording you made the room, the reactions Beatrice's exit. That's evidence. You need to make sure it's protected and that you're protected." Lacey absorbed this. "I've been recording these events for 2 years," she said. "This one and 2 others. I kept thinking someone should know what happens in rooms like this. Someone should have it." She swallowed. "I almost deleted everything 6 months ago. I thought I was being paranoid." Maya looked at her steadily. "What made you keep it?" Lacey was quiet for a moment. "My mother donated to the Children's Wellness Initiative 3 years ago, $800. She saved up for it." She didn't elaborate. She didn't have to. Maya put her hand briefly on Lacey's arm, not a long gesture. Just contact. Just the acknowledgement that a moment this real deserved. "You did the right thing," Maya said. "The whole time." Lacey nodded. Her jaw was tight. She was holding it together the way young people hold things together when they have decided to be strong and haven't yet had a private moment to be anything else. Maya's earpiece crackled. It was Marcus from the network. "You need to see this," he said. "Check the national feed. Something just broke." She pulled her phone from her clutch and opened the network's live stream. On-screen live from the estate's front entrance, a federal agent was reading something from a document to Beatrice Hale, who was standing with her hands clasped in front of her and her chin very slightly lifted, maintaining her posture, the way a person maintains posture when they are determined that nothing, not handcuffs, not cameras, not the entire collapse of everything they built, will take their dignity. Beside her, 2 more agents had intercepted the fixer before he reached the gate. His leather bag was being examined. His phone had been taken. And at the edge of the frame, barely visible, was Jonathan. He had stopped walking. He had stopped walking because one of the federal agents had stepped into his path and was speaking to him, and Jonathan was listening with an expression that Maya had never seen on his face before in 9 years of marriage. Not anger, not calculation, not the managed authority of a man who knew he was the most powerful person in the room, just fear. Pure and simple and human and entirely unmanaged. She watched it on the screen of her phone from inside the ballroom while 70 guests moved around her, and above her, the 4 screens still showed the network's broadcast, now running the extended version of the story with the full donor database graphic and the support line number at the bottom. And she thought, this is what accountability looks like. Not clean, not simple, not satisfying in the way revenge movies are satisfying, just real and complicated, and moving forward whether anyone was ready for it or not. Her phone rang. Not Marcus, not Elena, a number she didn't recognize, but with a Denver area code. She answered. "Is this Maya Carter?" A woman's voice. Careful, professional. "It is," Maya said. "My name is Dr. Sandra Okafor. I'm a pediatric oncologist at Denver Children's Hospital. I'm watching your broadcast." A pause. "We received a grant from the Hale Foundation 18 months ago, $2.1 million for our immunotherapy research program. The grant was approved, and then the funds never arrived. We were told there was an administrative delay. We've been waiting for 8 months." Another pause. "We had to reduce our research team by 4 people. We had to suspend 2 clinical trials." Maya closed her eyes for 2 seconds. "Dr. Okafor," she said, "I need you to write down a number." She gave her the network's legal line. She gave her the SEC's tip line. She gave her Elena Cruz's direct email. "Everything you have," Maya said. "Every correspondence with the foundation, every grant approval, every record of every follow-up call you made. Send it all tonight if you can. I've been keeping records." Dr. Okafor said quietly. I kept thinking there was going to be an explanation. I kept giving them the benefit of the doubt. I know, Maya said. That's what they counted on. She ended the call and stood very still for a moment. 2 clinical trials suspended, 4 researchers let go. Children in a hospital in Denver who might have been helped by research that was funded and then not funded because the money went somewhere else, somewhere that appeared on a ledger as a consulting invoice signed by a woman who didn't know her name was on it. She thought about Celeste Whitford. She turned and found her still in the corner she had retreated to different corner now near the string quartet, who had packed their instruments and were sitting quietly uncertain whether they were dismissed or simply forgotten. Celeste was on her phone. She had been on it for most of the last 30 minutes. Her posture had changed entirely. She was no longer the woman who had materialized out of the crowd like smoke polished and perfectly positioned. She looked exactly like what she was. Someone who had trusted the wrong person and was now doing the desperate arithmetic of how bad the consequences were going to be. She ended her call as Maya approached. My attorney says I need to come in tonight, Celeste said. Her voice was stripped of all its social architecture, raw, direct. She says the invoices are a serious problem. They are, Maya said, but they're a manageable problem if you're transparent immediately. How do you know? Because you didn't know, Maya said. And because there's documentation of that. Webb's email to Jonathan specifically said you didn't know and to keep it that way. That email is in the public broadcast now. It's time-stamped. It's in the federal record. She held Celeste's gaze. You were used. That's a different legal position than being complicit. Celeste was quiet for a moment. I thought he loved me, she said. It was not a plea for sympathy. It was just a statement of fact, the statement of someone recalibrating their understanding of a relationship at the same time as they're managing a legal crisis, doing both things simultaneously because there is no choice. Maya thought about saying something comforting. She thought about what she had said earlier. I remember what it felt like to trust him, and she decided that was still the truest thing she had to offer. Go to your attorney, she said. Tonight, don't stop anywhere else first. Celeste picked up her bag. She looked at Maya with an expression that was complicated and layered and that probably deserved more time and space than either of them had right now. For what it's worth, she said, I never thought you were. I didn't think you deserved what he did to you. Did you ever say so? Maya asked. Celeste's eyes dropped for a moment. No, she said. I know, Maya said. Go. She went. The room was thinning now. The guests were leaving in ones and twos, slipping out with the careful casualness of people who want to be gone but don't want to appear to be fleeing. The staff had begun clearing glasses. The crystal lights were still on above them, throwing their small, broken reflections across the walls, the evening's original perfection still present in the physical space, even as everything else had transformed. Senator Warren's wife stopped beside Maya on her way to the coat check. She was a woman of about 60, with silver-streaked hair and careful eyes that had spent all evening watching and saying very little. My husband is going to call his attorney tonight and distance himself from the foundation formally, she said. You should know that's coming. I assumed, Maya said. The woman paused. He is not a bad man, she said in the tone of someone who is saying a thing they half believe. But he is a man who does not act when acting is expensive. I know that kind, Maya said. The woman held her gaze. What you did tonight, what you built, and how you stood in this room. She stopped, seemed to decide something. I'm on the board of a domestic violence advocacy foundation, a real one. I would like to send you some information. Maya looked at her. I'd like that. The woman nodded and walked away. Elena's voice came through the earpiece. Maya, you need to get outside. They're taking Beatrice and Jonathan in for questioning. The network wants you on the steps. Will you do it? She looked around this ballroom one more time. The room that had been so perfectly constructed, so deliberately arranged as a monument to the Hale family's power and permanence. The crystal lights, the orchid arrangements, the 4 screens still running, the 30 or so guests who remained in their black and gold, standing in smaller and smaller clusters. Dr. Ewan was on the phone, her voice low and steady and purposeful. Davis was texting rapidly, his head bent over his phone. Lacey was sitting in one of the chairs near the window, her tablet in her lap, recording the quiet aftermath the same way she had recorded the explosive center. Maya said into the earpiece, "I'm coming." She walked across the ballroom through the east corridor toward the front entrance of the estate. The air changed as she moved, the warmth of the event giving way to something colder and sharper. She pushed through the front door. Outside, the estate's stone steps were lit by the headlights of 3 federal vehicles and the portable lighting that the network crew had set up quickly and efficiently in the way that crews do when they know a moment is happening and they have one chance to catch it. Jonathan was standing 10 feet away, speaking to a federal agent with 2 attorneys flanking him. His charcoal suit still perfectly pressed his face, the color of cold concrete. He looked up when she came through the door. They looked at each other across the cold December air of the estate steps. 40 feet away, Beatrice was being guided toward a federal vehicle. She was still upright, still composed, still carrying the posture that had taken a lifetime to build. But she turned once and looked back at the house, just one look, the look of someone saying goodbye to something. And in that single unguarded moment, Maya saw every year of it. The building and the controlling and the protecting and the deciding. The entire architecture of a life built around power so completely that the woman inside it had become indistinguishable from the structure. Then Beatrice got into the vehicle and the door closed, and she was gone from the Hale estate for the first time in 40 years. Jonathan watched the vehicle pull away. Then he looked back at Maya. "Was it worth it?" he asked. His voice traveled across the cold air between them, stripped of everything. She thought about Dr. Sandra Okafor on the phone 20 minutes ago, saying we had to suspend 2 clinical trials. She thought about Lacey's mother saving $800. She thought about 12,000 families. She thought about the mark on her cheek and the 9 years of slowly becoming less than herself. "Yes," she said. He looked at her for one more long moment. Then the attorneys turned him gently toward the vehicle, and he went. Dee appeared at Maya's shoulder with the camera. Elena's voice in the earpiece. "Ready when you are." The network light went red, and Maya Carter stood on the steps of the Hale estate in the December cold with the cameras on her and the lights in her face and the truth of everything that had happened in the last 4 hours radiating out from this one stone house into 12,000 living rooms and hospital waiting rooms and bedrooms where people were watching on their phones. And she took one breath, just one, and she began to speak. The breath she took on those steps lasted exactly 1 second. Then she spoke. "My name is Maya Carter. 3 hours ago inside this house, my husband struck me across the face in front of 70 witnesses. Not one of them intervened. What I want to say to the people watching tonight is not about him. It's about that silence. Because the silence in that room, the silence of people who saw something wrong and chose to protect their comfort over a woman's dignity, that silence is what made everything else possible. The fraud, the stolen money, the suspended medical trials. None of it happens without people choosing over and over to look away." The camera was steady. Dee held it without moving, without shifting, with the professional stillness of someone who understands that the worst thing you can do in a moment like this is interrupt it. The network feed was running live. And somewhere in Denver, Elena Cruz was watching on the studio monitor with her hands folded on the desk and her eyes very bright, and she did not say a word. Maya kept talking. She talked for 11 minutes on those steps about the families, about the foundation, about the specific mechanism by which trust is exploited when it is extended to people who have decided they are above accountability. She named amounts. She named programs that had never been funded. She described in plain and specific language what $43 million looks like when it moves through a charity and emerges somewhere else, cleaned and renamed and invisible. She did not mention Jonathan by name after the first sentence. She did not need to. When she finished, the network cut to a panel in the studio, and Elena's voice came into her earpiece immediately. "That's the clip that runs for the next 3 days," Elena said. "That's the one." Maya pulled the earpiece out and held it in her hand for a moment. The cold was real. December in Colorado, at 11 at night on stone steps, with the adrenaline of 4 straight hours beginning to metabolize into something that would feel tomorrow, like having been hit by something large and moving. Her cheek ached with a steady, dull insistence. Her feet hurt. She was beneath all of it, exhausted in the particular way of someone who has been holding enormous things for a very long time and has just in the last few hours finally set them down. Lacey appeared beside her with a coat. Maya's coat retrieved from somewhere warm and dark, and exactly what was needed. She held it out without saying anything. Maya put it on. "Thank you," she said. "My mother called me," Lacey said. Her voice was very quiet. She was watching. She said she recognized the name from the Wellness Initiative. She cried. Lacey paused. "She said to tell you thank you." Maya looked at her for a moment. "Tell her she's part of why this happened. Her $800 matters, not the amount the trust. People who trusted like that deserve to have someone fight for them." Lacey pressed her lips together and nodded, and then she did the thing she had been holding back all evening. She let her eyes go wet just briefly, just enough, and then she pulled it back together, the way strong young people do when they've decided they have more to carry before they're allowed to feel the weight of it. "What happens now?" Lacey asked. "Now," Maya said, "you go somewhere warm, you call your mother back, and you let yourself breathe for a few hours. Tomorrow the network's legal team will call. You'll know what to do." Lacey nodded. She started to turn away, then stopped. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Were you scared?" she asked. "Tonight. Any of it?" Maya thought about that honestly. "Yes," she said. "Most of it. Being scared doesn't mean you stop. It means what you're doing is worth being scared about." Lacey absorbed that. Then she walked back inside, and Maya turned back toward the driveway. The federal vehicles were gone. The estate was quiet, in the way that large places go quiet, after something seismic, not peaceful, just emptied. A few staff members moved through the main entrance carrying things. The network crew was breaking down equipment with the efficient speed of people who knew they had another location to reach before morning. Dee stopped beside her as she packed the camera. "Good night's work?" she said simply. "Yes," Maya said. "You ever want to do field again? Documentary, investigative, anything, call me first." She was gone before Maya could answer. Marcus called from the network van. "We've got confirmation from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Denver. They've opened a formal investigation. The SEC filed simultaneously about 40 minutes ago. You're going to want to be somewhere with a good attorney and a strong Wi-Fi connection for the next 72 hours. "I know," Maya said. "Elena wants a full debrief at 9 tomorrow, and the morning programs are already requesting you. All of them. Tell Elena I'll be there at 9. Tell the morning programs I'll get back to them." She ended the call. She stood alone on the steps of the estate for the first time all evening. Really alone. No cameras, no crew, no guests, no Lacey. And she looked up at the Colorado sky, which was the particular dark of a winter night in the mountains, sharp and clear, and full of more stars than you could see from any city. She had not looked at the sky in a long time. She had not had a moment that was only hers in a very long time. She let herself have this one. 3 weeks later, the Hale Foundation's board voted unanimously to dissolve the organization pending the completion of federal audits. Dr. Patricia Ewan issued a formal public statement on behalf of the 3 independent board members acknowledging the failures of oversight and committing to full cooperation with the U.S. Attorney's investigation. She personally called 47 major donors in the first week. She did not delegate those calls. She made every one of them herself. Davis resigned from the board the same day the dissolution vote passed and accepted a position advising a legitimate philanthropic oversight organization in Washington, D.C. His resignation letter, which he published publicly, was 6 pages long. It contained no self-justification and a great deal of specificity about what he had failed to do and why. Maya read it twice. She thought it was, in its painful honesty, one of the better documents to come out of the entire collapse. The SEC investigation expanded in the second week. Harris Webb, the financial officer who had moved the restricted funds and signed off on the false consulting invoices, agreed to cooperate with federal investigators in exchange for reduced charges. His cooperation opened 3 additional avenues of investigation, not just the foundation, but 2 separate investment vehicles that the Hale family had used to shelter foundation outflows through private accounts in the names of shell companies registered in Delaware and Nevada. It was worse than Maya's original story had shown, by a significant margin. And when the additional details broke, sourced this time by the network's full investigative team building on the foundation she had laid, the story moved from scandal to something larger. Congressional hearings were mentioned. Regulatory reform proposals began circulating. Maya did not chase those secondary stories. She had done her part. She handed off her documentation to the network's team and let them build. She had something else to build. Jonathan's first appearance before federal investigators happened 22 days after the gala. His attorneys had negotiated the terms carefully: voluntary cooperation, his own legal team present, limited scope. Maya knew from sources she did not name publicly that he answered some questions and declined to answer others. She knew from the same sources that the things he declined to answer were the things that pointed most directly toward his mother. She filed for divorce on the 23rd day. She filed it herself through her own attorney with no statement to the press. The filing was public record, as all filings are, and the media found it within hours, as the media finds everything. She did not comment on it. She did not respond to the 17 interview requests that arrived in the 24 hours after the filing appeared in the public record. She had said what she needed to say on the steps of the estate on a live broadcast in front of 12,000 families and everyone else who was watching. She did not need to say more. Jonathan's attorney issued a statement on his behalf. It was 3 sentences. It expressed respect for Maya's decision and requested privacy during a difficult time. Maya's attorney read it to her over the phone and waited. "Fine," Maya said. "Move forward." Beatrice's situation was more complicated. She had been released on bail the night of the gala. The federal agents that evening had brought her in for questioning, not arrest, a distinction that the media collapsed in its coverage, and she had returned to the estate and then left it 3 days later for a property in Connecticut that had been in her family for 60 years. Her attorney was conducting all communication. She issued no personal statements. She gave no interviews. She did not call Maya. Maya had not expected her to, but she found in the weeks after the gala that she thought about Beatrice more than she thought about Jonathan. Jonathan she understood entirely, finally, without illusion. He was a man who had been given so much unchallenged power for so long that he had lost the capacity to see other people as fully real. That was a comprehensible failure, if not a forgivable one. Beatrice was more complicated. Beatrice had built something, had managed something, had held a family and a dynasty and a public reputation together through sheer force of intelligence and will over 40 years. And somewhere in all of that building, she had made a decision, not one single decision, but a series of them, each one small enough to justify that the ends of what she was protecting justified the means of how she protected it. That money taken from grieving families was acceptable collateral for an institution she believed in. That a woman who asked too many questions was a liability to be managed rather than a person to be respected. Maya understood how that happened. She had spent her career studying how that happened. She did not forgive it, but she understood it, and the understanding she found made the anger cleaner, less personal, more useful. The Carter Line Initiative was incorporated on a Wednesday morning in January, 6 weeks after the gala. Maya had been planning it for longer than the investigation, longer even than she had known the investigation would happen. It had started as a thought, then a note in an encrypted file, then a series of conversations with an attorney who specialized in nonprofit law and who had once been a source on a different investigation years ago in another life. The initiative's mission was specific legal and media support for victims of financial and domestic abuse within high-net-worth family structures. Because those victims, Maya knew from experience and from reporting, faced a particular set of obstacles that other victims did not. They had signed prenuptial agreements drafted by the family's attorneys. They had reputations tied to the family's public image. They had, in many cases, given up careers and identities and professional networks to enter those families, and when they needed to leave, they found themselves without the resources that are the most fundamental requirement for fighting powerful people in court. The initiative would provide attorneys, it would provide media counsel, it would provide a protected line for people who needed to tell their stories but didn't know how to do it safely. And this was the part that mattered most to Maya, create a documented public record of the patterns. Because patterns were what investigations were built on. Patterns were what made individual stories into systemic accountability. Elena came to the incorporation signing. She brought coffee and a folder of press inquiries that she set on the table and did not open during the meeting. "You know what happens next," Elena said afterward, when the attorney had excused herself and they were sitting across from each other with their coffee cooling between them. "The press is going to run the initiative through the same scrutiny they'd run anyone through who came out of this." "Good," Maya said. Elena looked at her. "You're ready for that." "I built it to withstand it," Maya said. "I built the whole thing clean because I knew it had to be." She turned her coffee cup in her hands. "That's the difference. That's what I learned doing this. The thing you build has to be actually what you say it is. It has to hold up to looking at." She paused. "The Hale Foundation didn't hold up to looking at. I'm going to make sure this one does." Elena nodded slowly. "I want to do a profile piece on the initiative, full feature. I'd want you on the record not as a journalist, as the founder." "I know," Maya said. "Yes, after the first case completes." "You already have a first case." Maya looked at her. "I had 7 inquiries in the first 48 hours after the filing went public. 7 people who saw the coverage and picked up the phone." She held Elena's gaze. "One of them had been trying to leave her husband's family for 4 years. Prenup shared counsel, the whole structure designed to make leaving impossible. She's 29 years old." Elena was quiet for a moment. "The initiative launches publicly in 3 weeks," Maya said. "I need those 3 weeks to make sure everything is ready. After that," she paused. "After that, we go." Her first broadcast as a returning journalist, not a field segment from a gala, not a crisis interview on a state steps, but a scheduled produced investigative broadcast from the network's Denver studio, aired 8 weeks after the gala night. The topic was not the Hale Foundation. That story was in the hands of the legal system and the SEC and the congressional staffers, and she trusted them to carry it. The topic of her first broadcast was the pattern she had identified across 11 separate family foundations in 3 states, not as named investigations, but as a documented taxonomy of the mechanisms by which charitable structures were used to move money, manage family liability, and silence people who asked questions. It was a 40-minute broadcast, dense, specific-sourced, and clear. After it aired, the network's tip line received more than 2,000 contacts in 18 hours. Elena called her at midnight. 2,000 and climbing, she said. "I know," Maya said. "You understand what that means. That's not one story. I know what it is," Maya said. "We're going to need more people." There was a long pause on Elena's end. The comfortable pause of 2 people who understand each other well enough that silence doesn't require filling. "Glad you're back," Elena said. "I'm not back," Maya said. "I never really left. I just got quiet for a while." Another pause. "How's your cheek?" Elena asked. Maya touched it. The bruise was gone. Had been gone for 2 weeks. The skin was smooth and unblemished, the same as it had always been. Nothing visible remained of what had happened in that corridor outside the ballroom. But she remembered the sound of it. She would always remember the sound of it. The way it had traveled across the room, the way the room had gone silent, the way 70 powerful people had chosen in that single moment to look away rather than to act. She had stopped being angry about the silence. She had made it useful instead. "It's fine," she said. It healed. The last time Maya saw Lacey Grant was on a Tuesday afternoon in February, in the lobby of the Carter Line Initiative's new office space in downtown Denver. A spare functional set of rooms on the 4th floor of a building that smelled of fresh paint and possibility. Lacey had accepted a position as the initiative's first full-time case coordinator. She was 22 years old, had a background in social work, and had spent the last 6 weeks in training with the initiative's legal team. She arrived on her first day 15 minutes early with a notebook and the particular expression of someone who has decided exactly what they are doing with their life and is ready to begin. Maya found her in the lobby going over intake files. "You ready?" Maya asked. Lacey looked up. "I've been ready," she said, "since before I knew this was a thing I was ready for." Maya understood that completely. She thought about the evening that had made all of this, the crystal lights and the perfectly pressed suit and the 70 guests who had looked away and the sound that had traveled across a ballroom and broken something open. She thought about what had existed before that night and what had been built in the weeks after it. She thought about 12,000 families and 2,000 tip line calls and a 29-year-old woman who had been trying to leave for 4 years and had finally found somewhere to turn. She thought about what it had cost. She thought about what it had made. She thought about the last thing she had said on those estate steps into the live camera in the December cold, and she believed it more now than she had in the moment of saying it. Silence is not peace. Silence is permission for harm to continue. She had been silent for 9 years. She was done with that. Maya Carter walked into her office, sat down at her desk, opened the first file, and got to work. She was not surviving anymore. She was building something that would outlast everything that had tried to diminish her, and she was building it with the precision and the patience and the absolute unshakable conviction of a woman who had learned the hard way and then the right way, that the most powerful thing you can do in a room full of people who want you to be quiet is to speak clearly, to speak truthfully, and to never, not once, not for anyone, stop.